Okay, we are back and we are pretty much the last lecture. I think we have just a brief lecture on green chemistry at the end of all this. So that's kind of a light little piece of fluff next up. But this is kind of the meat of chapter 11 and the third edition, chapter 12 in the second edition, which is how do you solve a multi-step synthesis problem? And so what you're going to be presented with on the final exam and what you've already seen to some extent, I'm going to give you a reactant and I'm going to give you a product. I'm going to ask you, give me a series of reactions, 1 to 5, 1 to 6, however many it takes, that will take the reactant and turn it into the product. So whenever you run into this type of problem, and we have more practice in the PDF down below. So if you don't believe me, open up that PDF, print it out, take a look at it, and hopefully that'll make sense. When you start this synthesis problem, you have two questions that you want to answer. Number one, ask yourself, is there a change in the carbon skeleton? Is it gaining carbons? Is it losing carbons? Um, if there is, then you are kind of on the right track. You're going to know one or more of the reactions that need to take place. And then number two, ask yourself, is there a change in the identity and or location of the functional group? So that functional group could be a pi bond, could be a bromine, could be whatever it happens to be. To be able to solve these problems, you need to be able to quickly recall the reactions that we've learned, and then also just practice working through the examples. So again, practice using the PDF down below, and we'll just do a problem here together to kind of like help figure it out. So okay, so let's go ahead. Let's propose a synthesis for this transformation. We're taking an alkyne on the left, and we're going to turn it into an alkene on the right. Question number one, is there a change in the carbon skeleton? So we just need to ask ourselves, how many carbons do we start with? How many carbons do we end with? In the reactants, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 carbon chain, so 5. And then in the products, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So we go from a 5 carbon chain to a 7 carbon chain. So in other words, there is a change in the carbon skeleton. We have added on 2 carbons. Is there a change in the identity and or location of the functional group? Let's go ahead and check it out. So the alkyne has turned into an alkene, but it appears that this alkene is at least at the same position as the alkyne was, right? So this alkyne would be nominally between carbons 1 and 2, right? But as we kind of like do this setup here, we just count from left to right. We're not naming this alkyne, so we can just count the number however we like. The alkene then is still between carbons 4 and 5 in the products. So the location hasn't changed, just the identity. It's changed from an alkyne to an alkene. So we've got two different types of problems. We have to add 2 additional carbon atoms, and we have to take that triple bond and turn it into specifically a trans alkene. So what is it that we can do to accomplish this task? Go ahead, take a minute, pause the video, think it through. What reagents are we going to use to accomplish these two different things? Pause. Okay, I hope you're back, and I hope you took a chance to think about it. When we add 2 additional carbon atoms, there's only one reaction that we know that can do that, which is the alkylation of a terminal alkyne. So what we're going to need to do is we're going to have to take this terminal alkyne, turn it into an alkynide. So what that's going to do is then you can do a substitution reaction with a 2-carbon alkyl halide, so like ethyl bromide, for example. And then this will act as the nucleophile, and you'll add an ethyl group on top of it. Converting a triple bond to a trans alkene, hopefully this is fresh on your mind. That would be the metal reduction, right? So sodium in ammonia. So this is basically what I was just telling you here. To introduce the 2 carbon atoms, what you have to do is first deprotonate the terminal alkyne, and then add ethyl iodide or ethyl bromide, any alkyl halide that has the ethyl group on it here. Then, in order to go from the alkyne to the transalkene, use your dissolving metal reduction or sodium in ammonia. So we get 3 steps in total. Step 1, deprotonation. Step 2, substitution. Step 3, reduction, the dissolving metal reduction. So when we write it all out, we just write it out like this. Step 1, then step 2, then step 3. Now, yeah, and one key thing is you can't list all of these reagents together, because if you do that, then you just mix everything together, and that doesn't tell us like the order in which you need to do things. So if you, on the test, make sure that you're numbering your steps, just like what we see right here. Okay, so now that's a relatively simple problem, but many more complex problems would require a more complicated analysis. And one of the most efficient ways to do that is using what's called retrosynthetic analysis. And so retrosynthetic, what does that mean? It's like old or starting at the end. And so what that means is basically we're going to start by figuring out the last step first, and we'll start from the product and work our way back to the reactant. Now the same questions are still going to happen. Is the skeleton changing? Is the functional group changing or moving? But you're going to start with both the reactant and the product. So let's just go ahead and do a problem like that. So here what we're going to do is we're going to start with this alcohol, so primary alcohol. We're going to end with this alkyne. So let's go ahead and ask ourselves, is there a change in the carbon skeleton? So just count up your longest chain here. 1, 2, 3, 4 carbons. Down here, 1, 2, 3, 4 carbons, and they both have 2 methyl groups on that second carbon from the left. So the carbon skeleton has not changed. Is there a change in the identity of the functional group and or its location? Sure enough, we started with an alcohol and we end up with an alkyne. So definitely something has happened. So now the good news is the position is relatively unchanged, right? In this case, the alkyne is between carbons 1, 2, 3, and 4, and then this alcohol is on carbon 4. So the alkyne involves this carbon 4 in one way or another. Okay, so starting from the end, basically. So focusing on the last step here, what reactions do we know that you can use to make an alkyne? Think back to the last chapter. We had a section on the preparation of alkynes. How do we prepare them? Go ahead, give it some thought. You can pause the video if you need to. The one way that we know that we can prepare alkynes is by doing a double elimination reaction. And there's 3 different types. You can have a geminal dihalide, like here, these two, or you can have a vicinal dihalide, like this one here. Remember, geminal means the 2 halogens are on the same carbon. Vicinal means they're on neighboring carbons. Now, we don't know how to make these geminal dihalides, so the only one that we do know how to make is this vicinal one. So that's a big hint that in order to get from here to here, we're going to have to do an elimination on the vicinal dihalide. So that can be kind of a hint that you can use. I'm not going to present you with stuff that we haven't learned yet this semester. Okay, now, so we know that this alkyne can be made from this dibromide, because the way that you do that is you just do 2 elimination reactions in a row using excess of a strong base like sodium amide. So that's the most common one, sodium amide excess, and then protonate it with water. So that's our kind of final step there. Okay, now what do we know that can produce this dibromide? Can you think of a reaction that would produce this vicinal dibromide? Go ahead, you can pause it if you need to. Well, that should be familiar to you because that is the product of the halogenation, or more specifically, the bromination addition reaction to an alkene. So if we have an alkene like this, we know that we can just add Br2, and the Br2 is going to add 2 bromines across the double bond, one on either carbon. And as you'll recall, it's an anti-addition, but that doesn't happen. That doesn't make a difference here in this case. So far, what we know is we can make the alkyne from the vicinal dihalide, and then we can make the vicinal dihalide from the alkene. So we're already we're doing pretty well. So now the question is, how do we get from the alcohol to the alkene? And you might think that there's another step here. There might be. We don't know. I'm just giving you the hint here, basically. But how is it that we can go from an alcohol to an alkene? Can you recall from the addition chapter? Or actually, I think this was the elimination chapter. Remember, the way that we can actually do a reaction, like an elimination reaction with an alcohol, is by converting it into a sulfonate group. So what we do is we take the alcohol and react it with tosyl chloride. That turns it into a toluene sulfonate group, which is a good leaving group in pyridine. Then you use a bulky base like DBU or DBN. And what that's going to do is that will perform an elimination reaction and give you your alkene here. So now we've got our synthesis reaction all down. We know the first thing that we have to do is we tosylate the alcohol and then deprotonate it to give us the elimination reaction. Once we have the alkene, then we just halogenate it using bromine in CCl4. And then once we have the dihalide, we use excess of the sodium amide in water, excess of the sodium amide first, then use water to protonate it after you make the alkyne. So overall, that gives us a 5-step sequence, just like this. Right, so just when you finish this retrosynthetic analysis, just go through it briefly again from the first to the last, and that should give you a good idea if you're on the right track. Make sure that you're following the right sequence of events to get there. Okay, so I mean, that does it for multi-step syntheses. We've got just a brief lecture next on green chemistry and like keeping green chemistry in mind, but that'll be a very short one. This was the main part of this chapter. So again, make sure that you keep practicing the multi-step synthesis problems. They're going to be a big part of the final exam. So the PDF is down below. Give it a shot, and I will talk to you soon.